I've made over 200 videos on this channel, and to say that this video right here is the most important one I've made would be an understatement, and that is because I was granted a one-on-one interview with Charleston's Mayor Cogswell. So we are headed down to City Hall to ask him some questions, and I'm ready to bring you the full unedited interview. Mayor Cogswell, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thanks for coming.
So I got some questions that have kind of come up on my videos and in the comment section that people that live here or are moving here are very interested about.
Sure.
So getting into this, I want to talk about Charleston's growth first and foremost. So if we travel back in time a little bit to January 14th, 1975. So
I was like, January 14th is my favorite day. But anyway, keep going.
The day the future mayor of Charleston was born,
that's right,
the population of Charleston was around 70,000. Today, the city's pushing over 150, with the whole metro area closing in on 1 million at 750.
That's right.
Now, with that, this big population boom, what are you doing to preserve the character of the city and the historic landscape with this booming population?
It's a great question. And as I tell people, I mean, there's a unique DNA that is what causes everybody to love Charleston, right? And it's in part the built environment, the natural environment, but really, I do believe strongly, and this isn't just a talking point, I believe strongly the character of people that are here. There's a real pride of this place, and it's important to me to make sure that that pride and sense of ownership is maintained. And so how do you do that? I mean, there's no secret ingredient there, but you want to make sure that the people that, first and foremost, that have made this place what it is and helped define that character are able to stay here. And that is an area where I think we have real challenges, especially over the past 5 or 10 years. I mean, the population has really exploded. The affordability has become very problematic. And I truly believe that the ability for families to stay here is the #1 social and economic issue that we face, not just as a city, but really as a region. And so how do you solve for that? Well, again, no silver bullet there, but A, you have to take a regional approach. B, you have to be willing to try things. And C, that you need to do it in a way that respects the ethos of this city. And that's doing things that are in scale and the same type of quality, not compromising when it comes to our built environment or natural environment for that matter.
And you touched on something there with the term affordability.
Mm-hmm.
So on the national scale, Charleston's only about 12% over the national cost of living, but from a state perspective, about 25% more cost of living than the state. And you just made an announcement about working to get 2 properties on Morrison Drive for 500 affordable housing units. But then there was also a partnership with Bloomberg Associates that said by 2030, we need 3,500 affordable housing units within the city. So what are any plans or initiatives to either meet or exceed those while you're mayor?
Sure. It's a great question. First and foremost, we need to work on our system in terms of helping projects move forward that address affordability. And I want to make one point very, very clear here. A lot of people think of affordable housing as low-income housing. The way I think about it, and kind of the context that I use, is if you grew up here and you move away, you go to school, go to get your first job, what have you, but you can't afford to come back to your home, that to me is a problem. So in terms of how we're going to address it, we have 1,000 affordable housing units between 60 to 80, 120 AMI in the pipeline right now that we need to just help get through the pipeline. So that's priority #1. And then the balance of about 2,500 units, we need to look at. I have a few sites identified on the Eastern Peninsula and Western Peninsula that are tied to both current and future public transportation and are in close proximity to job centers. But then you're also going to have to look at other areas of the city and really, again, region. But from the city of Charleston's perspective, you want to do stuff in West Ashley that isn't just a huge apartment complex, but might be spaced in between certain market rate housing, right? So kind of mixed income. And between those three different approaches, I think we will be able to get to the 3,500 number. But I'm not naive enough to say that it's not going to be a real challenge, because, as you may or may not be aware, in the past 7 years, City of Charleston, despite Herculean efforts, has only been able to deliver just about 400 units. So it's about a 10x multiple that we've got to make up.
I think we've got enough land. I think we're more land than Boston and Washington, D.C. combined.
Yeah.
To work with.
Yeah, not quite the muscle memory when it comes to using public transportation as those markets, and so I think it's going to be some changing in attitudes. But I think the more people sit in their cars on 26 and on 17, the more they're going to want to see opportunities to live closer to where they work, and where they shop, and where their kids go to school, et cetera. So I think that attitude adjustment is coming almost out of necessity. But again, we have to do it in a very thoughtful way. We can't just, what works in Cleveland ain't gonna work in Charleston. We're a bespoke community, I like to say, even though I got yelled at for, anyway, using that term. But in any event, I do believe that we are unique, and the types of projects that we do here should be unique.
So I want to switch to another major issue that's affecting the city, and that's flooding. And now it's not just Charleston, though, because it's more widespread, the whole low country, the whole coast.
Yeah, we're the low country,
and,
right.
Yeah, and further than just downtown, which is like
Absolutely.
6 inches above sea level.
Right.
And so with the rising waters and the development into West Ashley, how are you working with the surrounding communities and counties to tackle the flooding issues and the development to make sure that everything is done correctly so that we don't end up underwater?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And absolutely, a lot of the focus historically has been on the peninsula. And certainly it has pretty severe needs and growing needs. But to your point, we're in the low country. Lots of parts of West Ashley, James Island, Johns Island flood, parts of North Charleston, Daniel Island, the Kansas Peninsula. And so we need to look at it from a holistic perspective. And one of the things that we've done is divided the city into drainage basins. And part of that's an education. I mean, when folks go out of their front door on, say, James Island, see a drainage ditch that runs along their property line, knowing where that drainage ditch ultimately has an outfall into one of the various creeks or rivers is important, because just making sure that your ditch is clean and clear of debris when we have a flooding event is a pretty important part of addressing this issue systemically, right? And so that's education, but then also, of course, specific projects and known deferred maintenance and known areas that are of issue, and addressing those. We have a lot of deferred maintenance that really is no longer maintenance, but a capital project. And so we've put together what we call the Basin Flood Action Plan, which is a mapping of all the 16 drainage basins in the city, and defined each project. Some of them are ongoing, some of them are just on the drawing board, some of them are ready for funding. So mapping those out, literally, and then starting to attack the funding sources, or find the funding sources to initiate those, is a must. And so that's where we are right now. And I'm optimistic that we're not going to solve our flooding problem, but we're going to dramatically improve the conditions that people live under now. And we're going to do things that prepare for a future which will have, by all scientific accounts, higher water levels. So we need to be prepared for that in advance as well. Be proactive about it.
And that's in addition to, like, with the development coming,
Sure.
with, like, the Magnolia Project or the Long Savannah Project, that people are concerned that this overdevelopment is displacing more water. So these plans are helping in taking all of that into consideration.
There's no question that it will help address that. But also, we now have a stormwater manual that is one of the strictest in the country in terms of, like, in areas like huge parts of West Ashley, or really any new development now, you actually have to improve with new construction the drainage on your site versus just making it net neutral. And so, we need to maintain that level of strictness, if you will. And we need to be, again, like I say, proactive on addressing the future flooding needs, because, again, it's not getting better, but we can do a lot of things right now to alleviate the problems, again, here and now and in the future.
And when it comes to the development, we've seen a lot of headlines of the big projects coming. Magnolia Project, the Low Line is seeing movement finally after quite some time.
Yeah.
Union Pier just in the headlines, moving forward with the TIF. They're getting all the headlines.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other little projects that are kind of going on. I want to know what isn't getting the press that you're excited about that's happening, these smaller projects that you think people in the city or moving to the city should know about.
Sure, it's a great question. One somewhat large project, but a potential tweak to it that I'm excited about is an alternative to the current landing of the West Ashley pedestrian bridge, which is starting construction actually this month. And right now, the landing on the peninsula side just comes to the B Street intersection and kind of dumps people there. But when we looked at it, we saw that it could tie into some future plans that the city has to extend the battery up the western side of the peninsula, tie into the Arc Bridge, and create this incredible multi-use path all the way down to the existing battery and go actually underneath the bridges to Brittlebank Park. And then create an architectural element that will, I think, be a real landmark and gathering place right there at the east side of the bridges that I think has incredible opportunity. So that's one that I'm excited by, and there's been some confusion around that.
Yes.
That it was, we brought in the bike ped advocacy group, Charleston Moves. Their whole board kind of came into this office last week and went through the details and kind of cut out all the noise and comments, if you will. And it was an incredibly productive meeting because it was very clear that we were all looking and wanting the same thing, and we're able to come to a pretty quick consensus on it, right? And so that's one. I would say other bike ped and just road safety improvements that are kind of boring to talk about, but I think they'll actually make a big difference. Along 61, down 17, DOT was coming in, and for road safety measures, we're going to put in just this raised median, concrete and pane, and wasn't very pretty. We're going to look at doing landscaping that can go in there and create shade and just beautification of those major thoroughfares that frankly have been, I think, long overlooked. And when you have projects anchoring it, like the new Sumar Street development, making sure that the access points to and from are beautiful places is something that I think will really resonate with people that live here and make a big difference for folks, that can, in the past might not have wanted to take their dog and children and their stroller to walk up to that. Well, now they're going to have a way to do that is an inviting way to do it versus just trying to dodge cars going 60 miles an hour. Other things like, it's funny, some of the small details really matter, like the approach off on the west side of the Ashley River Bridge into West Ashley, I think could really use some love. And there's some interesting ideas being batted around about the Round Holiday Inn. We've met with those owners and some of that property around there, and doing some beautification there that really makes you feel like you're arriving into a special place. So, those are small things, but I think they make a real difference.
And that would tie into the pedestrian bridge.
Exactly.
It would dump out
exactly.
right
Because when
there.
you start seeing this and you're like, look at all this these great things happening. But when you get over, you're like, well, this is some trash over here, and we could really do some cleanup and some landscaping here, and it wouldn't be really expensive to do it. It just needs some love. And so those things that, again, really get down to the personal experience of people that live here and what they see on a daily basis, I think are things that really do excite me and motivate me.
I love that, because those are the, outside of the peninsula, when people think Charleston, they're like, oh, it's the Charleston Peninsula. Yeah. Everything else is just in West Ashley.
Right.
But beautifying those two main entrances into West Ashley with Sumar and then over the Ashley River Bridge kind of goes back to that, creating that sense of pride in the city, even if you're not in a 300-year-old home downtown.
That's right.
You still have that pride going into West Ashley. I love
it. Absolutely. And Johns Island too. I mean, Johns Island is another, and Daniel Island for that matter. I mean, Johns Island and Daniel Island are the two areas that are growing significantly. And we are way behind when it comes to infrastructure, particularly on Johns Island. I don't have to probably tell you.
I lived there for 7.5 years.
I mean, I lived on Wadmalaw for 10, and just commuting, it was a nightmare, and it's worse now. And so really being thoughtful about, now that the transportation sales tax has failed, we've got to do something, not just as a city, but as a region. And we're putting together some ideas based on projects that have been outlined by the county, but specifically on Johns Island, that can really kickstart that. Because again, you talk about livability. I mean, Johns Island's a beautiful place, but it's not beautiful when you get on Maybank or when you get on River or you get on Main. It is a place that your blood pressure goes up through the roof, and it's not a cool place to be anymore. So we need to make sure that we address that. We addressed it holistically and pretty aggressively, because again, we're about 20 years behind when it comes to the infrastructure there. Same thing with Daniel Island and the Canhoy Road and Clements Ferry. You've got a lot of development coming that way that's been entitled for 25, 30 years. And we need to make sure that we're proactive on that infrastructure. And there have certainly been improvements that have been done along Clements Ferry and are being done now, but is that going to be enough? When you look at the stuff further up the peninsula, that if our population continues to increase the way it has, that's where people are going to go. So just being in front of things, and again, being proactive and being thoughtful and trying to tie in your infrastructure improvements with your Greenbelt funds, with your affordable housing, with your public transportation. I mean, all of it syncs together. And if you kind of look at it holistically, you're going to stretch your investment a lot further. And so coming from the real estate background that I have, that's kind of the way my brain thinks, for better or for worse. And so I think that I'm seeing opportunities the more I dig in.
Is there anything else that you would like to let people know? And I know you've made yourself extremely available to the residents of Charleston. So, let people know, like, once a month you sit down in a different place. Like, how can they find out information about that to get that quick one-on-one time, maybe ask you a question once a month?
It's great for me to connect with people on an individual basis. We do coffee with the mayor once a month, various parts of the city. We post it on our website, in our newsletter, on our Instagram, all social media. It is very constructive for me to hear from people. I got some people that come in and are really angry and yell at me. Usually people are usually come in pretty hot and then they cool down pretty quickly. But I mean, they're usually frustrated for good reason. And a lot of the problems that we have, not always, but oftentimes they're simple solutions. And that's one of the most rewarding things that I've found in my short term, so far as mayor, is that you really can make a difference in people's day-to-day lives. And that's what really motivates me to come into the office every day and excites me about this job and a city that I love.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Yeah,
thank you.
Good to see you.